Namaste. So in this little series about my path and my work, I have to bring up a subject that may be very controversial. We often see that spiritual teachers, gurus, or heads of religious organizations are subject to criticism, to put it mildly, due to their personal activities, their sex life, and so on like that. And from my point of view, this is simply social hysteria. Because it really doesn't matter, to a realized soul what his bodily activities are. The body is going on by its own energy, by its own karma. And one's destiny will work itself out, no matter what you do. And I also see the obsession with celibacy as being something very neurotic and ultimately sick. And why is that? Because, let's make a silly example just to show how ridiculous it is. I have this habit of breathing. I just can't seem to kick it. No matter what I do, no matter how much I meditate, I still have to breathe. You see how ridiculous that is? To try to artificially become celibate without fully experiencing one's sexuality, especially, I think is just foolhardy. I think it's impossible, actually. And my experience bears this out. Now, before I get to that, though, I want to briefly review the Chatur Darshanam. Here's the good old chart. There are 4 darshans, or views, of the absolute and the world. And these were categorized by Shankaracharya into 4 basic levels. Dvaitavada, Vishishtadvaitavada, Vivartavada, and Ajatavada. And the sadhaka's view of the absolute and of the world falls into these 4 categories according to their advancement. In the beginning, the Kanishta Adhikari, who's basically a Shudra, although he may be religious, his religion or his spiritual view is completely dependent on scriptural rules and regulations. So his yoga is karma yoga, and the result that he gets from it is punya, or merit, good karma. The Vishishta Dvaitan is called the Madhyama Adhikari. He's basically a Vaishya, a tradesman. And although there are actually very few of them, their yoga is bhakti. Not the bhakti based on rules and regulations, Vaidhi bhakti. That's for the Dvaitavadis. But spontaneous bhakti based on real love for God. And those people experience prema as the result of their practices. This is very beautiful. Then there's the Vivartavadis, the Tivra Adhikari. Tivra means ripe. So when the sadhu is ripe, then he gets this view of the world as simply an appearance in Brahman. And the typical Vivartavadi is a kshatriya, a warrior. He's not afraid to go out on the battlefield and risk his life, or even lose his life, because he's acting according to dharma, and he knows that will bring him a higher birth in the next life. So their yoga is Raja Yoga, and the result they get from it is shunya, the perception of emptiness. Finally, there's the Ajatavadi, and that's for the Atitivra Adhikaris, the completely fully ripe souls. And they are the real brahmanas, although there's very, very few of them, only a handful at any given time. And they are the ones who can practice jnana yoga. Nobody else. The result of that is they realize Brahman. They realize the self. So I was very, very happy when I came across this knowledge, these 4 categories, as a result of reading Ramana's book, Guru Vachaka Kovai. Guru Vachaka Kovai means a garland of the Guru's sayings. And it was compiled by his mentor and disciple. How can somebody be both a mentor and disciple? Well, Muruganar, who was a great scholar and poet himself, took Ramana's teachings and expressed them in beautiful Sanskrit poetry, and then ran them by Ramana for approval. So the sayings in this book are as good as Ramana's direct sayings themselves, because they capture the essence of his teaching. And I started a series on Guru Vachaka Kovai, but there didn't really seem to be that much interest in it. But it's very, very important, and you should read it. Anyway, so these 4 categories are there for the people who are qualified for them. Now, in the beginning of spiritual life, the Dvaitavadis have to follow certain rules and regulations, and among those are celibacy. Celibacy means at least to restrict the sex life. And of course, the main purpose of that is to concentrate one's energies on spiritual life. But when someone becomes advanced, when they reach the spontaneous stage, where one thinks of God day and night without any need for ceremonies or associations or, rules or regulations, then they're free. They're not bound by all these rules, and that includes celibacy. And actually, there are many, many examples of this in the scriptures. For example, a good one just popped into my mind, that Bhima, one of the 5 Pandava brothers, had a really wild affair with a demoness named Gatochka. And Gatochka taught him all the wild ways of Devan lovemaking. This is right in Mahabharata. And the 5 Pandavas themselves, they had a common wife, Draupadi. 5 husbands, 1 wife. And each of the husbands had other wives as well. So nobody seems to make an issue of this when it comes to the Pandavas. But if a spiritual teacher nowadays is found not to be celibate, it's a big issue. It's a big deal. People will call for their removal and stuff like this. And I think this is just, gross sexual politics. It's really a kind of nagging, The way a wife will find fault with a husband for something that's perfectly normal and natural and use it to beat him up and get more power in the relationship. Men do it too. So this is really a neurotic thing, not erotic, neurotic. This obsession with celibacy. And we see it in so many contexts. Now there's a big thing, the Me Too thing. There were claims of sexual harassment, which are often proved to be false, are leveled at any kind of public figure. But it doesn't matter. The damage is done. Well, what damage? The damage to their reputation. And what about this reputation? Because the public falsely expects any kind of important person to follow a puritanical code of sexual ethics, which is just stupid. It's unrealistic. It ain't going to happen. Why? Because anyone who's powerful in any way is going to have a lot of attention, a lot of opportunities for sexual relationships. And, a person who's normal is going to have sexual relationships. In ordinary life, if someone remains a bachelor or a virgin their whole life, we think something's wrong with them. Well, why should it be any different for spiritual leaders, or any kind of leaders for that matter? A person becomes a leader because they have some extraordinary energy or qualities or intelligence. So how do you think they're going to become celibate? There was a big spiritual leader, Dilgo Khyentse. Dilgo Khyentse was very, very influential in Buddhist circles, especially Tibetan Buddhism. And he had a consort. He had a concubine, basically. A woman who he maintained like a mistress exclusively for his tantric practices. But nobody ever made a big deal out of that. It was it was just accepted. So what's the problem if any other spiritual leader or spiritual teacher wants to have an affair, or wants to have a mistress or a girlfriend? What is the problem, people? You're envious. You're not getting it. And if they do, then you can make it into a big problem for them. What kind of character is that? Petty, mean, low, envious, hateful character. So I call bullshit on this. This obsession with celibacy. There's a nice Buddhist story. 2 monks were going along the road. They came to a river. And to cross the river, there was one woman waiting, saying, I can't find a boatman and I can't cross the river. Could you help me? So the older monk took the woman on his shoulders. They crossed the river, and then he put her on the other side. So after walking some time more, the younger monk said, why did you take that woman on your shoulders? And the older monk said, I put her down on the other shore. You're still carrying her. So it's the same way with these people who get all wound up about celibacy and spiritual teachers having a sex life. First of all, it's none of your goddamn business. A person's private life should be private. They should have privacy. We have a right to privacy. Now, I know in this day and age, everybody's under surveillance, But that's just as screwed up as the whole obsession with, purity and celibacy and all this stuff. Nobody is pure. Everybody goes to the bathroom in the morning. Don't they? Should we criticize them for that? Or maybe we should criticize their eating habit. Oh, this spiritual teacher is all hung up on food. He has to eat every day. So if these bodily functions are not a bone of contention, well, why should any other bone be an object of contention? Get over it, people. Grow up. So, in the interest of full disclosure, I have to tell you a story about my own realizations. I've several times described the big enlightenment experience I had in 1984. And it was basically the same as the one Osho Rajneesh describes and makes a big deal out of. But actually, if you go to the original Buddhist writings, it's just first path. First path realization is a glimpse of Brahman. How the pure unconditioned consciousness is the basis of all arisings, and how the non-dual objectless awareness is the foundation of everything. It's a wonderful experience, and it's very dramatic. It's like, wow. So it does make a big impression. And then you spend the rest of your life trying to repeat it. But it's a gift, it's a blessing from Shakti. And in my case, it was a direct manifestation of Shakti. I describe, after meditating like 18 hours a day for 6 weeks or so, one day, just after lunch, I felt a feminine presence in the room. I couldn't see anybody, but I felt like there was a female in the room. And then I got like a tap on the forehead, and boom. It was wonderful. But what I have never revealed before publicly, and which I really should now in the interest of driving home this point, is that after I had lunch, I masturbated. I had a nice tantric experience. And then right after that, Shakti came and gave me Shaktipat, and I realized Brahman for the first time. So if I had been all hung up about celibacy, actually for weeks before that, I didn't even think about sex. I was engaged in my practice. Now, somebody in the beginning, in the Dvaitavada stage, should be celibate, or at least try to be celibate, or minimize their sex life as much as possible, so they have the energy and the focus to climb above that beginning status. And people in these spiritual organizations are hypocrites. I was in ISKCON, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, for over 20 years. And let me tell you something. All the big swamis who are supposed to be celibate aren't. Not only are they not celibate, they're taking drugs, they're stealing money from the organization through various sophisticated means. So these are not pure devotees. And the same is going on in Buddhism. When I was a Buddhist monk, there were so many gay monks. It was just incredible. And not only that, the monasteries were in league with gangs and laundering money and even selling drugs. And people tell me that in Nepal, that the monks are even acting as pimps. So, I mean, who is celibate? Who is pure? Even the Dalai Lama engages in hardball politics. So, who are these people to demand that others follow some rules and regulations that they don't even follow themselves? It's so naked hypocrisy. So, anyway, the point is, don't be focused on these external things, but rather focus on your practice. Focus on consciousness. And there are so many examples I can give from scriptures. Janaka was a realized soul, and yet he ran an extensive kingdom, including a harem full of harem girls, concubines, which he visited often. And in fact, he even got his first indication of self-realization in his harem after a very intense sexual experience. And, we were going through the Tripura Rahasya. Well, in the Jnana Kanda, the most popular section of that book, most of the action takes place in the pleasure rooms of the royal palace. So what is this about celibacy? Why do people get all hung up on it? I think it's just a club that people use to beat up others and establish some kind of supremacy over them. I think it's a political device, in other words, and that is mostly misused to establish some kind of social dominance over the followers and stuff like that. And the leaders don't even really follow it themselves. So don't get all hung up on these external things. Focus on your practice and try to realize the self, Brahman, the pure awareness behind everything. Om Tat Sat. Om Harihi Om.